Hello, and thank you for joining me for this quick and easy guide to group facilitation for the Northfield Conference. My name is Bill Milford, and on behalf of the leadership of the conference, I want to thank you if you already are a group facilitator or a family facilitator, or you are considering becoming one. Thank you for your participation in doing this. I think a lot of folks find the families process to be one of the more meaningful parts of the week for them, and your contribution as a facilitator makes an important difference for folks in terms of the quality of their group experience. So here are some hopefully helpful hints that can assist you in doing the facilitation of the families, and this will be supplemented by conversations with other family facilitators and leadership folks in the family facilitatorship group. And so if you've got any questions, I think a useful way to go about this is just to write them down while I'm going through the presentation. And also, if you want, there will be a scroll bar at the bottom of the screen where you can replay things over and over and over again if stuff doesn't make sense to you. And we look forward to talking with you further about this. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about group facilitation. The good news about this is that it's easy. It's easy, it's fun, and it's meaningful. And when I say you've already done it before, I think you've probably, even if you've never facilitated a group or a family up at Northfield, you have some of the important experience that makes you a good group facilitator. The challenge with all of this is that sometimes folks come into doing small groups with a couple of assumptions. So there's a few things that you may have to unlearn first before we go about learning some of the things that are helpful to do. So let's take a look at those unlearning things first. First, forget about it. It ain't psychotherapy, even though it may feel like psychotherapy at some point. That is, when people talk about things that are very personal to them or very important to them, they may become emotional. Psychotherapy is a very specific process whereby you're using individual techniques in order to get a specific outcome with someone. With group facilitation, what we're trying to do is provide an opportunity for people to be better known to one another. So we're trying to create the conversational milieu, as they might say, in order for people to be able to talk freely and openly to one another. And forget about it, it ain't getting all touchy-feely and such. If you're a touchy-feely person, hey, all the power to you. But, you know, if on the touchy-feely scale you're about a 5, you should be about a 5 touchy-feely facilitator. The important thing is for you to be yourself and not to go outside your comfort zone. But there are things that you can do that will help people to feel more comfortable within the group setting. And the first is to remember that your goal, if we're going to look at a big picture issue of what group facilitation is all about, it's to help people connect. That is, to help people to be known to one another, because that bond between the two of them and between members of the group is going to make an important difference in them feeling like they are part of a community. And part of this is based on the fact that if there is anything that's therapeutic about a group, it's the same thing that's therapeutic about a friendship. And that is that the healing is in the hearing. That is, when people talk and other people listen, really listen, that there tends to be a validation of self, which means that you feel like, you know what, I've let somebody know who I am, and they've accepted me, therefore I'm okay and I can go about my life with a little bit more confidence and self-assurance that I'm a good person. And notice that this hearing part does not have necessarily a response to it. It does not mean that you tell somebody any specific insight or anything like that. All of the healing is in the hearing, just in them knowing that somebody else knows them, that it makes a tremendous difference. So then the big question is, well, how do you do this? How do you create a small group environment where folks feel like they can be known to one another, and what's your role in it? Well, here's the good piece about that is that you've already done it before. Dun, 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 dun. It's a party, and you are the host. That means you're getting people together, and you are the one that's responsible for how that party flows. Now, you've probably had parties and hosted parties before. Are you responsible for everybody's behavior? No. Can you make people have a good time? No. But you can set up an environment whereby people come in, are able to connect, and make their own good time. And there's some intentional things that you can do in order to help facilitate that to occur. Thus the idea of you being a facilitator. So let's take a look at what a good host does. Well, first of all, they make people feel welcome. They're going to make sure that they know that it's important to you, that you're glad that they came to your party. Second thing is that you're going to want to make sure that they're comfortable, that they're actually physically comfortable, that they have a space that works for them, considering whatever special needs they might have. Third might be that you're going to help them to mingle. You're going to set up things in such a way that people will get to interact with one another. Usually at a party, that's making sure that you have plenty of room around where the food is, because that's the first thing that people go to is the food, and you want to make sure that people can talk over the food. The fourth thing is setting some boundaries so that people feel like they know where they can or can't go within the party. Like sometimes you'll say, well, I only want you using the guest bathroom that's downstairs, please don't go upstairs. It's setting up some general boundaries that people are usually very enthusiastic to respect. They just want to know, what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. Another one is to make sure that everything that goes on in the party happens. So like if there's a birthday party, well, you may have just people milling around for a while, but at some point you want to bring out the cake. At some point you may want to have presents given, or at some point you might want to have little speeches to go on. And then the last piece is to make sure that people know when it's time to go and then get them out of your house. So let's figure out how all this translates to being a Northfield facilitator. Well, the welcoming part is pretty intuitive. That you can be a role model of friendliness in terms of how you greet everyone, being authentic, and sort of the warmth by which you say hi and try to include them and get them to come along with you. And then this is also the first part where I feel like it's really important that you pay attention to where people are at. And that is, some people don't respond to an overly enthusiastic greeting. Some people can sort of feel overwhelmed by it. So whenever you communicate with someone, pay attention to how they respond and try to work with their comfort level to help them incrementally move slowly forward toward feeling more and more welcomed and more included. In terms of comfort, because there's a variety of abilities at the conference, what you're going to want to do is pay attention to that that your meeting space is in a place where everybody's comfortable and everybody can find a way to sit, interact with one another, and that their physical comfort is not going to become an issue. For one group it may be everybody sitting on the grass. For another group it may be folks needing to sit in chairs so people can sit up straight with their back. Some folks might have wheelchairs, so you need to make sure that you're in an accessible area. But think ahead as to how you can create a space where people are going to feel most comfortable for the duration of the family time. Now here's the real big challenge of being a facilitator, which is to help people connect. And in the social work biz, we call this rapport building. How do you start to begin this process of sort of peeling back the onion where people sort of reveal a little bit more and more about themselves? So the first thing you do is try to talk about things that folks have in common. It could be hobbies or interests and various friends or locations and things people like to do for fun. Another is to pay attention to the kinds of questions that you ask people, because when you ask what we call a closed-ended question, which is, did you have a good time at dinner last night? that tends to get a yes or no response, whereas opposed to, tell me about dinner last night and the folks that you sat with and what you all had to eat. And that tells people to tell me a story. So when you use questions that begin with tell me about or how did, you're asking for an explanation, and that's going to lead to a more full answer that will get you more information. And then with more information, there's a higher likelihood that people are going to connect with something in common from it. So what you can do as a facilitator is during a check-in time when everyone's talking about how they're doing or how their day's gone, you can keep your ears open to hear if there are any common themes that might be shared by the group members that you could go back to discussing once everybody's done with the check-in, if there isn't anything specific that other folks want to talk about. So look for those things that are in common, the threads that are in common, and then try to build upon those. Now, setting boundaries, this is the more formal role of the facilitator in terms of people are going to be looking to you to provide leadership on what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And this gets spoken about a little bit later on when we talk about the roles of the facilitator and how they're viewed within this process. But in general, you'll be talking about some group norms at the beginning of the week. And the group norms are pretty normal. I mean, you just want people to be good people. So you talk about confidentiality, respect, and integrity. And to a certain extent, that creates a unique space because we don't always operate in a confidential space when we're out in the world, or an assumption of that. So here we talk about it explicitly, try to make sure that people are talking one at a time and that people get to finish speaking before somebody else provides a response. And then another tricky part of it, depending on how people are used to talking, is encouraging people to speak for themselves and from their own experience. When people give advice, they're usually talking about their own experience, but they're coaching it in the context of what someone else should do. So if you can encourage people to talk about their own experience, it will tend to lessen the amount of advice giving that goes on. And that'll get talked about in another little workshop piece later on. The next thing that you can make sure that you do as a facilitator is that all of the activities of the group are covered. And that's pretty straightforward. You have a little attendance piece. You're going to say, okay, well, now it's time, now that everybody's here, we're going to get going. You do a check-in, and then you see if there's agenda that people want to talk about. If not, then you can have other conversation or games or things like that, and then you make sure that things close. But you're the one that's going to be keeping your eye on making sure that all these things occur. And then perhaps one of the most important ones, especially for those folks who want to get to lunch, is making sure that you stop on time, that you keep track of time, and that you tell people, you know, it looks like we got about 10 minutes left. Is there anything else that people want to talk about? And in a more of a therapeutic context, one of the important things about talking about stopping is that it helps people to own and take responsibility for meeting their own needs. Because when you know when things are going to end, then you can decide for yourself whether you want to raise a point or not raise a point during a given discussion time. And those are active choices that people make. And we can help them to make choices that are useful for themselves. But if they, you know, if somebody was planning on talking about something and then all of a sudden the time runs out, then they've lost that choice as to whether to say, yes, I want to talk about this, or no, I don't want to talk about this. So giving folks as much information about how much time is left can be really useful for them making good decisions for themselves. So in summary, a good facilitator is a good host. You don't have to be a therapist. In fact, forget about it. It puts too much on your head to be thinking, oh, how can I make this happen? No. All you need to do is role model how to be a good friend. And good friends listen, acknowledge, and try to connect with one another. And then in the big picture, as a good host, you're trying to make sure that everyone's participating in a way that they feel comfortable and within the norms that you spoke about as to how you want to function as a group. If you can just keep your mind wrapped around those particular parameters, I think you'll do great, and there'll always be people to talk about if you hit some bumps in the road in doing it. So thanks very much, and look forward to talking to you further about group facilitation.